Section 2 of The Gutting of Couffignal by Dashiell Hammett. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 2. 4. No good rushing that, I said. Roll out of it. I set the example by revolving toward the back of the building we had just left. The man at the gun sprinkled the beach, but sprinkled it at random, his eyes no doubt spoiled for night-seeing by the flash of his gun. Around the corner of the building we sat up. "You saved my life by tripping me," the lad said coolly. "Yes, I wonder if they've moved the machine gun from the street, or if—" The answer to that came immediately. The machine gun in the street mingled its vicious voice with the drumming of the one in the boat. "A pair of them," I complained. "Know anything about the layout?" "I don't think there are any more than 10 or 12 of them," he said, "although it is not easy to count in the dark. The few I have seen are completely masked, like the man in the boat. They seem to have disconnected the telephone and light lines first, and then to have destroyed the bridge. We attacked them while they were looting the bank, but in front they had a machine gun mounted in an automobile, and we were not equipped to combat on equal terms." "Where are the islanders now?" "Scattered, unless General Pleshkev has succeeded in rallying them again." I frowned and beat my brains together. You can't fight machine guns and hand grenades with peaceful villagers and retired capitalists. No matter how well led and armed they are, you can't do anything with them. For that matter, how could anybody do much against a game of that toughness? "Suppose you stick here and keep your eye on the boat," I suggested. "I'll scout around and see what's going further up, and if I can get a few good men together, I'll try to jump the boat again, probably from the other side. But we can't count on that. The getaway will be by boat. We can count on that. Try to block it. If you lie down, you can watch the boat around the corner of the building without making much of a target of yourself. I wouldn't do anything to attract attention until the break for the boat comes. Then you can do all the shooting you want." "Excellent," he said. "You'll probably find most of the islanders up behind the church. You can get to it by going straight up the hill until you come to an iron fence, and then follow that to the right." "Right." I moved off in the direction he had indicated. At the main street, I stopped to look around before venturing across. Everything was quiet there. The only man I could see was spread out face down on the sidewalk near me. On hands and knees, I crawled to his side. He was dead. I didn't stop to examine him further, but sprang up and streaked to the other side of the street. Nothing tried to stop me. In a doorway, flat against a wall, I peeped out. The wind had stopped. The rain was no longer a driving deluge, but a steady downpouring of small drops. Couffignal's main street, to my senses, was a deserted street. I wondered if the retreat to the boat had already started. On the sidewalk, walking swiftly toward the bank, I heard the answer to that guess. High up on the slope, almost up to the edge of the cliff by the sound, a machine gun began to hurl out its stream of bullets. Mixed with the racket of the machine gun were the sounds of smaller arms and a grenade or two. At the first crossing, I left the main street and began to run up the hill. Men were running toward me. 2 of them passed, paying no attention to my shouted, "What's up now?" The third man stopped because I grabbed him, a fat man whose breath bubbled and whose face was fish-belly white. "They've moved the car with a machine gun up on it behind us," he gasped when I had shouted my question into his ear again. "What are you doing without a gun?" I asked. I dropped it." "Where's General Pleshkev?" "Back there somewhere. He's trying to capture the car, but he'll never do it. It's suicide. Why don't help come?" Other men had passed us, running downhill as we talked. I let the white-faced man go and stopped 4 men who weren't running so fast as the others. "What's happening now?" I questioned them. "They's going through the houses up the hill," a sharp-featured man with a small mustache and a rifle said. "Has anybody got word off the island yet?" I asked. "Can't," another informed me. "They blew up the bridge first thing." "Can't anybody swim?" "Not in that wind. Young Catlin tried it and was lucky to get out again with a couple of broken ribs." "The wind's gone down," I pointed out. The sharp-featured man gave his rifle to one of the others and took off his coat. "I'll try it," he promised. "Good. Wake up the whole country and get word through to the San Francisco police boat and to the Mare Island Navy Yard. They'll lend a hand if you tell them the bandits have machine guns. Tell them the bandits have an armed boat waiting to leave in. It's Hendrickson's." The volunteer swimmer left. "A boat?" two of the men asked together. "Yes, with a machine gun on it. If we're going to do anything, it'll have to be now while we're between them and their getaway. Get every man and every gun you can find down there. Tackle the boat from the roofs if you can. When the bandits' car comes down there, pour it into it. You'll do better from the buildings than from the street." The three men went on downhill. I went uphill toward the crackling of firearms ahead. The machine gun was working irregularly. It would pour out its rat-tat-tat for a second or so, and then stop for a couple of seconds. The answering fire was thin, ragged. I met more men, learned from them that the general with less than a dozen men was still fighting the car. I repeated the advice I had given the other men. My informants went down to join them. I went on up. 100 yards further along, what was left of the general's dozen broke out of the night, around and past me, flying downhill with bullets hailing after them. The road was no place for mortal man. I stumbled over two bodies, scratched myself in a dozen places getting over a hedge. On soft, wet sod I continued my uphill journey. The machine gun on the hill stopped its clattering. The one in the boat was still at work. The one ahead opened again, firing too high for anything near at hand to be its target. It was helping its fellow below, spraying the main street. Before I could get closer, it had stopped. I heard the car's motor racing. The car moved toward me. Rolling into the hedge, I lay there, straining my eyes through the spaces between the stems. I had 6 bullets and a gun that hadn't been yet fired on this night that had seen tons of powder burned. When I saw wheels on the lighter face of the road, I emptied my gun, holding it low. The car went on. I sprang out of my hiding place. The car was suddenly gone from the empty road. There was a grinding sound, a crash, the noise of metal folding on itself, the tinkle of glass. I raced toward those sounds. 5. Out of a black pile where an engine sputtered, a black figure leaped, to dash off across the soggy lawn. I cut after it, hoping that the others in the wreck were down for keeps. I was less than 15 feet behind the fleeing man when he cleared a hedge. I'm no sprinter, but neither was he. The wet grass made slippery going. He stumbled while I was vaulting the hedge. When we straightened out again, I was not more than 10 feet behind him. Once I clicked my gun at him, forgetting I had emptied it. 6 cartridges were wrapped in a piece of paper in my vest pocket, but this was no time for loading. I was tempted to chuck the empty gun at his head, but that was too chancy. A building loomed ahead. My fugitive bore off to the right to clear the corner. To the left, a heavy shotgun went off. The running man disappeared around the house corner. "Sweet God!" General Pleshkiff's mellow voice complained. "That with a shotgun I should miss all of a man at the distance." "Go round the other way," I yelled, plunging around the corner after my quarry. His feet thudded ahead. I could not see him. The general puffed around from the other side of the house. "You have him?" "No." In front of us was a stone-faced bank, on top of which ran a path. On either side of us was a high and solid hedge. "But, my friend," the general protested, "how could he have—" A pale triangle showed on the path above, a triangle that could have been a bit of shirt showing above the opening of a vest. "Stay here and talk," I whispered to the general and crept forward. "It must be that he has gone the other way." The general carried out my instructions, rambling on as if I were standing beside him. "Because if he had come my way, I should have seen him. And if he'd raised himself over either the hedges or the embankment, one of us would surely have seen him against—" He talked on and on while I gained the shelter of the bank on which the path sat, while I found places for my toes on the rough stone facing. The man on the road, trying to make himself small with his back in a bush, was looking at the talking general. He saw me when I had my feet on the path. He jumped, and one hand went up. I jumped with both hands out. A stone turning under my foot threw me sideways, twisting my ankle, but saving my head from the bullet he sent at it. My outflung left arm caught his legs as I spilled down. He came over on top of me. I kicked him once, caught his gun arm, and had just decided to bite it when the general puffed up over the edge of the path and prodded the man off me with the muzzle of the shotgun. When it came my turn to stand up, I found it not so good. My twisted ankle didn't like to support its share of my 180-some pounds. Putting most of my weight on the other leg, I turned my flashlight on the prisoner. "Hello, Flippo!" I exclaimed. "Hello," he said without joy in the recognition. He was a roly-poly Italian youth of 23 or 4. I had helped send him to San Quentin 4 years ago for his part in a payroll stick-up. He had been out on parole for several months now. "The prison board isn't going to like this," I told him. "You got me wrong," he pleaded. "I ain't been doing a thing. I was up here to see some friends, and when this thing busted loose, I had to hide because I got a record, and if I'm picked up, I'll be railroaded for it. And now you got me, and you think I'm in on it." "You're a mind reader," I assured him, and asked the general, "Where can we pack this bird away for a while under lock and key?" "In my house there is a lumber room with a strong door and not a window." "That'll do it. March, Flippo." General Pleshkev colored the youth while I limped along behind them, examining Flippo's gun, which was loaded except for the one shot he had fired at me, and reloading my own. We had caught our prisoner on the Russians' ground, so we didn't have far to go. The general knocked on the door and called out something in his language. Bolts clicked and grated, and the door was swung open by a heavily mustached Russian servant. Behind him, the princess and a stalwart older woman stood. We went in while the general was telling his household about the capture and took the captive up to the lumber room. I frisked him for his pocket knife and matches. He had nothing else that could help him get out, locked him in, and braced the door solidly with a length of board. Then we went downstairs again. "You are injured," the princess, seeing me limp across the floor, cried. "Only a twisted ankle," I said, "but it does bother me some. Is there some adhesive tape around?" "Yes," and she spoke to the mustached servant who went out of the room and presently returned, carrying rolls of gauze and tape and a basin of steaming water. "If you'll sit down," the princess said, taking these things from the servant. But I shook my head and reached for the adhesive tape. "I want cold water because I've got to go out in the wet again. If you'll show me the bathroom, I can fix myself up in no time." We had to argue about that, but I finally got to the bathroom where I ran cold water on my foot and ankle and strapped it with the adhesive tape as tight as I could without stopping the circulation altogether. Getting my wet shoe on again was a job, but when I was through I had 2 firm legs under me, even if one of them did hurt some. When I rejoined the others, I noticed that the sound of firing no longer came up the hill, and that the patter of rain was lighter, and a gray streak of coming daylight showed under a drawn blind. I was buttoning my slicker when the knocker rang on the front door. Russian words came through, and the young Russian I had met on the beach came in. "Alexander, you're—" the stalwart older woman screamed when she saw the blood on his cheek, and fainted. He paid no attention to her at all, as if he was used to having her faint. "They've gone in the boat," he told me while the girl and the 2 men servants gathered up the woman and laid her on the ottoman. "How many?" I asked. "I counted 10, and I don't think I missed more than 1 or 2, if any." "The men I sent down there couldn't stop them?" He shrugged. "What would you? It takes a strong stomach to face a machine gun. Your men had been cleared out of the buildings almost before they arrived." The woman who had fainted had revived by now and was pouring anxious questions in Russian at the lad. The princess was getting into her blue cape. The woman stopped questioning the lad and asked her something. "It's all over," the princess said. "I'm going to view the ruins." That suggestion appealed to everybody. 5 minutes later, all of us, including the servants, were on our way downhill. Behind us, around us, in front of us were other people going downhill, hurrying along in the drizzle that was very gentle now, their faces tired and excited in the bleak morning light. Halfway down, a woman ran out of a cross path and began to tell me something. I recognized her as one of Hendrickson's maids. I caught some of her words. "Present's gone. Mr. Brophy murdered. Oliver." 6. "I'll be down later," I told the others, and set out after the maid. She was running back to the Hendrickson house. I couldn't run, couldn't even walk fast. She and Hendrickson and more of his servants were standing on the front porch when I arrived. "They killed Oliver and Brophy," the old man said. "How?" "We were in the back of the house, the rear 2nd story, watching the flashes of the shooting down in the village. Oliver was down here, just inside the front door, and Brophy in the room with the presents. We heard a shot in there, and immediately a man appeared in the doorway of our room, threatening us with 2 pistols, making us stay there for perhaps 10 minutes. Then he shut and locked the door and went away. We broke the door down and found Brophy and Oliver dead." "Let's look at them." The chauffeur was just inside the front door. He lay on his back with his brown throat cut straight across the front, almost back to the vertebra. His rifle was under him. I pulled it out and examined it. It had not been fired. Upstairs, the butler, Brophy, was huddled against a leg of one of the tables on which the presents had been spread. His gun was gone. I turned him over, straightened him out, and found a bullet hole in his chest. Around the hole, his coat was charred in a large area. Most of the presents were still here, but the most valuable pieces were gone. The others were in disorder, lying about any which way, their covers pulled off. "What did the one you saw look like?" I asked. "I didn't see him very well," Hendrickson said. "There was no light in our room. He was simply a dark figure against the candle burning in the hall. A large man in a black rubber raincoat with some sort of black mask that covered his whole head and face, with small eye holes." "No hat?" "No, just the mask over his entire face and head." As we went downstairs again, I gave Hendrickson a brief account of what I had seen and heard and done since I had left him. There wasn't enough of it to make a long tale. "Do you think you could get information about the others from the one you caught?" he asked, as I prepared to go out. "No, but I expect to bag them just the same." Couffignal's main street was jammed with people when I limped into it again. A detachment of Marines from Mare Island was there, and men from a San Francisco police boat. Excited citizens in all degrees of partial nakedness boiled around them. 100 voices were talking at once, recounting their personal adventures and braveries and losses and what they had seen. Such words as machine gun, bomb, bandit, car, shot, dynamite, and killed sounded again and again in every variety of voice and tone. The bank had been completely wrecked by the charge that had blown the vault. The jewelry store was another ruin. A grocer's across the street was serving as a field hospital. 2 doctors were toiling there, patching up damaged villagers. I recognized a familiar face under a uniform cap, Sergeant Roche of the Harbor Police, and pushed through the crowd to him. "Just get here?" he asked as we shook hands. "Or were you in on it?" "In on it." "What do you know?" "Everything." "Who ever heard of a private detective that didn't?" he joshed as I let him out of the mob. "Did you people run into an empty boat out in the bay?" I asked when we were away from audiences. "Empty boats have been floating around the bay all night," he said. I hadn't thought of that. "Where's your boat now?" I asked him. "Out trying to pick up the bandits. I stayed with a couple of men to lend a hand here." "You're in luck," I told him. "Now sneak a look across the street. See the stout old boy with the black whiskers standing in front of the druggist's?" General Pleshkev stood there with a woman who had fainted, the young Russian whose bloody cheek had made her faint, and a pale, plump man of 40-something who had been with him at the reception. A little to one side stood Big Ignati, the 2 men servants I had seen at the house, and another who was obviously one of them. They were chatting together and watching the excited antics of a red-faced property owner who was telling a curt lieutenant of Marines that it was his own personal private automobile that the bandits had stolen to mount their machine gun on, and what he thought should be done about it. "Yes," said Roche. "I see your fellow with the whiskers. Well, he's your meat. The woman and 2 men with him are also your meat, and those 4 Russians standing to the left are some more of it. There's another missing, but I'll take care of that one. Pass the word to the lieutenant, and you can round up those babies without giving them a chance to fight back. They think they're as safe as angels." "Sure, are you?" the sergeant asked. "Don't be silly," I growled, as if I had never made a mistake in my life. I had been standing on my one good prop. When I put my weight on the other to turn away from the sergeant, it stung me all the way to the hip. I pushed my back teeth together and began to work painfully through the crowd to the other side of the street. The princess didn't seem to be among those present. My idea was that next to the general, she was the most important member of the push. If she was at their house and not yet suspicious, I figured I could get close enough to yank her in without a riot. Walking was hell. My temperature rose. Sweat rolled out on me. "Mister, they didn't none of 'em come down that way." The one-legged newsboy was standing at my elbow. I greeted him as if he were my paycheck. "Come on with me," I said, taking his arm. "You did fine down there, and now I want you to do something else for me." Half a block from the main street, I led him up on the porch of a small yellow cottage. The front door stood open, left that way when the occupants ran down to welcome police and Marines, no doubt. Just inside the door, beside a hall rack, was a wicker porch chair. I committed unlawful entry to the extent of dragging that chair out on the porch. "Sit down, son," I urged the boy. He sat, looked up at me with puzzled, freckled face. I took a firm grip on his crutch and pulled it out of his hand. "Here's $5 for rental," I said, "and if I lose it, I'll buy you one of ivory and gold." And I put the crutch under my arm and began to propel myself up the hill. It was my first experience with a crutch. I didn't break any records, but it was a lot better than tottering along on an unassisted bum ankle. The hill was longer and steeper than some mountains I've seen, but the gravel walk to the Russian's house was finally under my feet. I was still some dozen feet from the porch when Princess Shukovsky opened the door. End of Section 2.